Welcome to the 100X Life Podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Hey, 100X Livers, welcome back to the podcast. I hope you had a great week. And I want to return to that question we asked last week. How did it go? Answering the question, am I representing Jesus enough in my life? If you recall from last week, we were talking about Charlie Kirk and the impact he had. The question that seemed to echo across the world, even in Seoul, Korea, we had thousands of people chanting, I am Charlie Kirk. That has been kind of a theme. And he was a good representation of Jesus. In other words, he always put Jesus first and foremost in what he did, both forward facing and also within his family life. So we asked that question, and a lot of people are asking this question, am I representing Jesus enough in my life? I had a really incredible week of thinking about that and how I can start shifting my own life and how I do business, and what does it look like to be honoring to Jesus, not shoving it down people's throats, but actually just being face forward and not afraid to state what really is. So I hope you looked at that question because we are beginning a new generational season, and that season is spring. Many of you have heard me talk in the past about the seasons, the generational seasons. Neil Howe and Strauss put together a book. They're historians from Harvard, and they put together a book analyzing the repeating generations in sets of four in America. And as you've read in Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season. Turns out for generations, there's also a season. You can call them spring, summer, fall, winter, if you like. In the winter season, there is always war. In the summer season, there's always revival. And the spring season is going to be a season of morality for Gen Zers. That's going to be what they're going to focus on. We're already seeing that take shape. And then here in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, we're asking this question. Many people asking this question, am I representing Jesus enough in my life? I think the answer is it can be more. It's just a matter of shaping what that looks like. So we want to ask in terms of this season, if the Generation Zs if they're the ones who are going to be double down on morality, what is your role in this season? What does this season require most of you? And I think the answer is just like we talked about last week, and I want to go even deeper on it. Salt and light. Last time I talked about light and salt. I'm going to talk about salt and light. Salt, and I'm taking a different version of the same truth. Salt is grace. Salt is preservation, as we talked about last week, but salt is grace. It's actually favoring someone when they don't deserve it. If a cop pulls you over for speeding and gives you a ticket, that's justice. If the cop pulls you over for speeding and does not give you a ticket, that's mercy. But if the cop pulls you over for speeding and gives you $1,000, that's what grace looks like. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. This is what God does. We sin. He says, no, I'm going to actually not only save you through the cross, but I'm going to actually supersize your power and authority by giving you my mantle and my mission. Salt is grace. Light is truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the truth. As we know in John 1, the Bible says that Jesus is the truth, is Jesus. He lived with us and dwelt with us. And in my opinion, these are the operating system of love. In other words, salt and light, or grace and truth, those are the operating systems of love. Love works through grace and truth. And the words of Jesus, as we study in 100X Life, they are the behaviors of love. The operating system of these behaviors is always going to be grace and truth. In 100X Life, we talk a lot about the behaviors of love and practicing obedience, but we don't talk a lot about the reward of love. The reward of love is so insanely good. You could even say that it is the abundant life. I just had this morning, actually, I had someone text me and just gave me an amazing compliment about how they'd read 100X Life. They just finished their 5th time. It was such a blessing. And they were saying all this transformation that's come from reading the words of Jesus and for dedicating them their lives more succinctly and repentance, transforming the way they think in the words of Jesus. And they were saying, man, this is so special. Thank you so much for doing this. And I gotta say that those compliments, they're very humbling, but they also feel very good. I'm just like, okay, that was good. And what my practice is to say thank you. I could say, man, that was all God, but that would be wrong because if God wrote 100x Life, I think it'd be a little bit better, a lot better. But I say thank you. And then I went to the Father this morning and I said, hey, Trinity, what about this feeling? Is this appropriate? What are you feeling? And I just got blasted by the Father, just saying how pleased, how he adored my desire for his word. And it was just this love fest, this just crazy love fest. It was kind of like I was reminded of Jesus when he brought back the disciples and welcomed back the 72 on two different occasions, and how his heart was just on fire with joy to see others that he had invested in actually doing the work, actually doing the healing, and actually leading people towards salvation and towards Jesus. And his heart was full, and he was full of joy. That's how I felt when I heard from my Father. And this made me think about something. I've been thinking about this for the last 4 weeks, and I didn't put this in 100x Life, but let me tell you, this is really cool. The reality is the body celebrates what the mind and the spirit have done. Isn't that crazy? What the body resists at first, it's going to celebrate in the end. And this is God's design for your life. This is how he's designed you, the triune being, your body, mind, spirit. We add soul for relational. But let me give you an example of what I was feeling a number of weeks ago. I was working out, actually before I worked out, and I needed to go to the gym, and I was going to be on the treadmill doing 400s for time and then resting a minute or so in between. And I was going to do 12 of them. And it's one of the hardest workouts I do. And my body did not want to do it. My body was complaining, don't go to the gym. No, we can take today off. Do you really want to go? And I said, and the mind took authority. It said, no, we're going to the gym. And then here's what's so funny is after the workout was done, the body celebrated. It celebrated the moment. It's almost like the body was like, man, this feels so good. I'm so glad we did this workout. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but you didn't want to do this workout. Now you're celebrating it. And that's a really cool thing to recognize, that the body, although it resists at first, it's going to celebrate in the end. And that's how it is with God. I'll give you an example in terms of words of Jesus. So let's just say forgiveness. Jesus says it's very important that we forgive others. In other words, he even says that as we forgive others, then we will be forgiven. At the end of what's traditionally known as the Lord's Prayer, he says, and if you do not forgive, neither will my Father in heaven forgive you. So those are some pretty scary words. So forgiveness is really big. But how many know the body does not want to forgive? The body doesn't want to do it. The body's like, no, you were gypped, you were had, you can't forgive that person. Or if the coin was flipped, you don't have to ask. You don't have to go to that person and apologize. Don't do it. You were justified in doing it. The body's just complaining and whining. And then when the mind takes authority and is led by the spirit to actually forgive, here's the funny thing. The body gets all excited. The body's like, oh, man, what a relief. I feel so much peace now. I'm so glad we did that. And what I want you to take away from this is that when our body is resisting us, if we're going to be salt and light and we're going to go into the world and we're going to bring grace to people, we're going to bring truth to people, the body is going to be complaining. The body is not going to want to do it. The mind is going to have to take authority and give it to the spirit to lead. But here's the good news. The body in the end will celebrate what you did, becoming salt and light. So that's what we want to focus on. And the active following Jesus requires that you become more like him. You have to have more salt, which is grace. You have to have more light, living in the truth. And when you and Holy Spirit embody Jesus' commands, the result is pure joy for you. This is the glory of God, to uncover and experience love, and God is love. So another way to say it is you are experiencing God when you practice the words of Jesus. This is what the world needs most right now. It needs you practicing the words of Jesus. It needs your personal testimony of transformation. It needs to experience you experiencing God. The gospel is a complete inside job. First, he calls you to transformation before he calls you to something else. That's the way it was with me. And you know, my story is he called me to transformation in one word, and I went the other direction. And I put my advancement on pause for a good amount of time. For about a decade, I put my advancement on pause because I refused to believe a word of Jesus. But when we turn around and realize and not ignore the call of transformation, this becomes the pathway to life to the full. This is when our body's also going to celebrate through obedience and representing Jesus more in this world. Again, back to our question, are you representing Jesus enough? Representing him more in this world requires your personal transformation. You don't have a teaching if you don't have a testimony. We don't study the Bible to teach. We study to be transformed. We want our minds to be renewed. We want our behaviors to be curated in love. And then when we teach out of that transformation that we've experienced, the body's experienced, the mind has taken authority, and the spirit's led, that's when it's authentic. That's when people see Jesus in us. And becoming salt and light to Gen Zers looks like you in the gym, carefully working out the words of Jesus. That's what that looks like. You're in the gym, carefully, methodically working out on each word of Jesus and bringing more joy into your life, bringing more fulfillment. And again, I just love the thought that the body will celebrate with us, even though it's resistant to be in the gym, the Jesus gym of transformation. So here's the workout for this week. It's salt and light. We're going to do a workout. Hopefully you've answered the question. The answer is I need to represent Jesus more. And so you're going to do that. And so here's the workout for this week is we're going to practice salt and light. Salt being the practice of grace, light being the practice of truth. And when we live in grace and truth, we will experience love, as we've been pointing out. When we see people as God has created them to be, then we'll walk in salt and light. This is a big deal. And we've talked about this a lot in 100X Life, is we have to come into agreement with what Jesus sees in others. He sees an image bearer. He sees one of God's kids. He sees something worth dying for. It doesn't matter how much sin someone has or how bad or how evil. What Jesus sees is he sees a person worth dying for. And we need to have grace and truth for people if we're going to operate in love, and we need to see people as Jesus sees them and come into agreement. That's when we're going to be salt and light to the world. How would you know if you're lacking salt? Well, for instance, if I can't forgive, if I keep marinating and telling myself a story that I was betrayed and ripped off, or even worse, speaking it out to a friend, you might actually be lacking salt if you're meditating on the judgment of others. So I did that, use the word meditate in the inverse as a negative thing. You're actually that person, they're such this, they're such that, they need to change. No, we need to focus on our change. I think that what that looks like is you might not have salt if you're focusing on what people are doing wrong rather than unifying with them on where we agree or where they're doing right. If you're condemning people, you definitely are lacking salt. You might find yourself attacking people's identity through words like idiot, loser. Those are just totally attacking the identity. Like if you called someone a liar because they lied, that would be attacking their identity rather than saying, hey, another way to do that, maybe the way Charlie Kirk would have done it is he would have said, hey, you are not that. You are actually someone who was designed to practice truth. You don't need to lie. You don't need to actually say the wrong thing. You can walk in truth and have freedom. So we need to see that in others without condemnation. He all listens to what Jesus says about his children, and it speaks this out. For example, when you're a friend of someone and they come to you and they say, "Oh man, I screwed up. I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did this," and they start beating themselves up in front of you. What your response is typically going to be is, "No, you're seeing it too negative. Actually, you're this, you're that." That's the way we want to change the way we see, just like we would do with a close friend, and then develop the skill to do that with someone who we're not friends with, who may be ripping us off. It's very hard to do. That's the gym, but that's what requires for us to have salt or grace. How would you know you're lacking light or truth? Well, if you lack Jesus' behaviors and perspective, then you lack light. You've got to walk in the light. As the word of Jesus says, Be careful how you see. And that is that your eye is the lamp of the body, and how you see is how the light is formed. So seeing truth and focusing on truth is how your light is going to shine the brightest. My recommendation, start with the words of Jesus. As you put his words into practice, your light will shine brighter. It's just inevitable, because the behaviors of love is truth. The behaviors of love are the words of Jesus. You, Christian, are the reputation of Jesus. It's kind of crazy, but you are his reputation. So based on how you act, when people learn you're a Christian, they're going to say, oh, a Christian's a good thing or a bad thing. How many people in the world think the word Christian is a bad thing right now? I guarantee you that if we were living the behaviors of love and salt and light, the reputation of Jesus would be so much better. And people would say, oh, Christian, I know that person. They're a very loving, forgiving person. They're always for me. That's how we know we're representing him well, when we're doing and saying. So you are the reputation of Jesus. And if we're going to move into this moment of expanding the way we represent Jesus, we're going to have to double down on salt and light. Now is the time to make a commitment. I think more than ever, today was Charlie Cook's funeral. The news cycle continues to pound on this. People are searching out what he said. And so much what he said was, here's how to know Jesus. You got to know Jesus. Here's the truth. Here's what's most important. It's Jesus. He was constantly pointing to that. And all these people are rushing to find out what this martyr was killed for. And it's going to be a complete rising of the spring generation, the Z generation. So don't wait. Today is the time to make a commitment to doing more. Courage does not come without a commitment. What are you committed to doing? Maybe it's practicing grace this week. Maybe it's focusing practicing a word of Jesus. Those would be great. We're going to focus on that this week, but don't wait. Time is shorter than you know. You only get one life. This life will be your legacy in heaven. I hope it is. And I hope the impact is on the Gen Zers, where we're transforming their lives and speaking into them, seeing them as important and paying attention to this next generation. What are you going to do with your time, talent, and treasure to impact this next generation? How is your own personal transformation going to live out as salt and light in this world? So I got some journal prompts for you to think about. You can write them down, might be helpful. The first one is, what areas are you growing me in grace or in truth? First question is, hey, Papa, what areas are you growing me in grace? What areas are you growing me in truth? Hear from him on that. Journal from him on that. And then, what is your vision for me, Papa, in this season? How do you see me? The vision that Jesus gave Peter was, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. But he doesn't say that to you because you're not a fisherman, and the metaphor doesn't make any sense. So what is he saying to you? What is Jesus's vision for you in this season? Follow me and I will make you what in this season? And then make that your commitment. Write it down. And more importantly, don't just write down your commitment. Tell a friend what you've decided to do. Courage will begin to build as you go into the practice of living it out. Remember, the 100X life is a daily practice. It's a practice. We're always practicing. I will always be practicing up until the day I meet Jesus face to face. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this week, and I hope you will follow through and be inspired to dig down and exercise salt and light as you go through your days this week. Bless you. We'll see you next week. If you believe in the 100X Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100X Life movement could also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100X Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services, with music by Ryan Ellis.
But you found me here, and your fire burns inside. It will not disappear, because the Spirit